This one thing will attract thousands of earthworms overnight. Last spring I did something in my garden that seemed almost too simple to work. I was skeptical, honestly. But the next morning, when I pulled back the material I'd laid down, I literally gasped. The ground was writhing with earthworms, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all congregating in an area that had been nearly lifeless just 24 hours earlier. My neighbor thought I was crazy, kneeling in the dirt at 7 in the morning, grinning like I'd struck gold. But in a way, I had. Earthworms are living gold for gardeners. They're nature's tillers, fertilizer factories, and drainage engineers all rolled into one, and I'd discovered the single most effective way to summon them to exactly where I wanted them. The secret? Wet cardboard. That's it. No expensive products, no complicated techniques, just plain cardboard kept consistently moist. But before you roll your eyes and click away, let me show you the science behind why this works so incredibly well, and exactly how to use this knowledge to transform your garden soil forever. Before we dive into the technique, you need to understand why attracting earthworms matters so much. These creatures are doing work in your soil that you literally couldn't pay someone enough to do manually, and they're doing it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every earthworm in your garden is constantly tunneling, creating channels that improve drainage, allow air to reach plant roots, and give roots themselves pathways to grow through compacted soil. In just 1 acre, earthworms can create hundreds of miles of these beneficial tunnels. Think about that. A network of infrastructure built completely free, improving your soil structure more effectively than any amount of tilling. But the tunneling is just the beginning. Earthworms are eating machines, consuming organic matter and soil as they move through the ground. What comes out the other end, worm castings, is one of the most perfect fertilizers nature has ever created. Castings contain 5 times more nitrogen, 7 times more phosphorus, and 11 times more potassium than the surrounding soil. They're also loaded with beneficial microorganisms and growth hormones that make plants explode with vigor. I've seen tomato plants in worm-rich soil outgrow identical plants in worm-poor soil by 40% or more. The difference isn't subtle, it's dramatic and consistent. Earthworms create soil that holds more water during drought, drains better during heavy rain, and provides a steady stream of nutrients without any fertilizer input from you. They're the ultimate garden ally. Here's exactly what I do, step by step, because the details matter if you want to see the same results I've experienced. Start with plain corrugated cardboard, the stuff boxes are made from. Avoid cardboard with heavy ink, glossy coatings, or tape still attached. I collect boxes from deliveries, break them down flat, and remove any plastic or metal before using them. Choose an area in your garden where you want to build worm populations. This could be a new bed you're establishing, an area with poor soil, or simply your best beds that you want to make even better. I've used this technique everywhere from my vegetable beds to around fruit trees with equally impressive results. Lay the cardboard directly on the ground in overlapping layers, making sure there are no gaps. I typically use 2 layers for good coverage. The cardboard should cover the area completely. I usually work in sections about 4 by 8 feet, which is manageable and uses a couple of large boxes broken down flat. Now comes the critical part that most people miss. You need to saturate that cardboard completely. I mean absolutely drenched, not just damp. I use a hose with a gentle spray and soak the cardboard until water is pooling on top and the cardboard is totally saturated all the way through. This initial soaking is essential because earthworms need moisture, and dry cardboard will actually repel them. Once saturated, I cover the wet cardboard with about 3 to 4 inches of compost, grass clippings, shredded leaves, or a combination of these materials. This serves multiple purposes. It holds moisture in the cardboard, provides food for the worms, blocks light which worms avoid, and starts building your soil while the worms do their work underneath. The reason wet cardboard is so incredibly effective at attracting earthworms comes down to understanding what these creatures actually need to thrive. Earthworms require 3 things: moisture, darkness, and food. Wet cardboard provides all 3 in exactly the right combination. Cardboard holds moisture remarkably well once saturated. It acts like a sponge, creating a consistently damp environment that earthworms gravitate toward. In my experience, cardboard maintains moisture far better than just mulch alone, and it creates a buffer against both drying out and oversaturation. Worms can sense this moisture from surprisingly far away and will migrate toward it. The darkness factor is equally important. Earthworms avoid light, UV radiation actually damages them, and they can dry out quickly when exposed. The cardboard creates a perfect dark refuge right at the soil surface, where worms can feed on the cardboard itself and the organic matter you've layered on top. I've lifted cardboard after just one night and found worms clustered so thickly on the underside that the ground seemed to move. But here's the real genius of this method. Cardboard is food. It's made from plant material, it's carbon-rich, and as it breaks down, it feeds both earthworms and the beneficial microorganisms that earthworms depend on. The worms don't just visit the cardboard, they move in, feeding on it directly and on the microbes decomposing it. You're not just attracting them, you're giving them a reason to stay and multiply. When I first tried this method, I checked obsessively because I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. Let me walk you through what typically happens so you know what to expect and when. Within the first 24 hours, you'll see earthworms beginning to congregate under the cardboard, especially if you already have some worm population in your garden. I've carefully lifted corners of cardboard the morning after laying it down and counted dozens of worms where there might have been 2 or 3 visible before. They're not appearing out of nowhere, they're migrating from surrounding areas toward this perfect habitat you've created. By day 3 or 4, the population under the cardboard peaks. This is when I see the most dramatic concentrations. The worms are feeding heavily, and if you look closely, you'll see them actually consuming the cardboard itself, leaving darker, partially digested patches. The underside becomes covered in worm castings, and the soil beneath starts feeling different, looser, more crumbly, more alive. Over the next few weeks, something magical happens. The cardboard slowly breaks down, incorporating into the soil along with all that worm activity. The worms don't leave when the cardboard disappears. They stay because you've improved the soil structure and organic matter content. You've essentially created worm habitat where there wasn't adequate habitat before. I usually leave the cardboard and covering material in place for 4 to 6 weeks, keeping it moist with occasional watering if rain doesn't cooperate. By the time I'm ready to plant, the cardboard has mostly decomposed, the worm population has established itself permanently, and the soil underneath has been completely transformed. After using this technique across my entire garden over several seasons, I've learned some tricks that dramatically improve results. First, timing matters. I get the best worm attraction during mild, moist weather. Spring and fall are ideal. Summer works too, but you'll need to water more frequently to keep the cardboard from drying out. I avoid doing this during winter and cold climates because worm activity drops significantly when soil temperatures fall below 40 degrees. The moisture maintenance is crucial, and where many people go wrong, you can't just set it and forget it. I check my cardboard areas every few days and water if the top starts drying out. The cardboard should always feel damp to the touch, not crispy or dried at the edges. I've found that a good soaking once or twice a week is usually sufficient unless we're in a drought or heat wave. The covering material you choose also impacts results. I get the fastest worm populations when I use a mix of green and brown materials. Fresh grass clippings mixed with shredded leaves works phenomenally well. The grass provides nitrogen that heats things up and attracts microbes, while the leaves provide structure and additional carbon. Coffee grounds mixed into the covering material also seem to attract worms incredibly well, and I always add them when I have them available. Location matters too. Earthworms are already more abundant in some areas of your garden than others. I've had the best results placing cardboard near existing compost piles, around the drip line of trees where leaves accumulate, and in beds where I've previously added lots of organic matter. You're working with existing populations and encouraging them to concentrate where you want them most. Once you've successfully attracted and established a thriving earthworm population, the real question becomes how to maintain and leverage it for long-term garden success. This is where most gardeners miss the opportunity, treating this as a one-time trick rather than the beginning of a regenerative system. I never till or deeply disturb areas where I've established worm populations. Tilling destroys their tunnels, disrupts their habitat, and can literally cut worms in half. Instead, I practice no-dig gardening, adding compost and amendments to the surface and letting the worms incorporate them downward. This preserves all the soil structure they've created and allows populations to continue building year after year. I also maintain a consistent layer of organic mulch, usually 3 to 4 inches of wood chips, straw, or shredded leaves. This gives the worms continuous food and maintains the moist, dark surface conditions they love. Every time I add mulch, I'm essentially recreating some of the conditions that the cardboard originally provided, encouraging worms to stay active near the surface where they benefit my plants most. Avoiding chemicals is non-negotiable if you want to maintain healthy worm populations. Most synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides are toxic to earthworms. I've seen worm populations crash in gardens where people got impatient and reached for chemical solutions. Stick with organic practices, and your worms will reward you with soil that barely needs any inputs at all. Here's what gets me most excited about this whole approach. It gets better every year. The first season you use the cardboard method, you'll see good results, improved soil structure, better plant growth, increased organic matter. But the second year, the third year, the improvements compound in ways that are honestly hard to believe until you see them yourself. In my oldest beds, where I've been building worm populations for 5 years, the soil has completely transformed. What started as hard clay, now crumbles in my hands, drains perfectly after rain but holds moisture during dry spells, and grows plants that barely need any attention from me. I've measured organic matter content increasing from less than 2% to over 6% in some areas, entirely from worm activity and the organic matter I've been feeding them. My fertilizer costs have dropped by about 80% because the worms are cycling nutrients so efficiently. My water use has decreased because the soil structure is so improved. Plant diseases and pest problems have diminished because healthy soil grows resilient plants. All of this traces back to that simple decision to lay down some wet cardboard and invite earthworms to the party. You don't need expensive products, complicated techniques, or specialized knowledge to transform your garden soil. You need cardboard, water, and the understanding that earthworms are looking for, exactly what you can easily provide. This is accessible to every gardener, whether you're working with a small urban plot or multiple acres. Start small if you're skeptical. Choose one bed or even just a 4x4 section. Lay down your wet cardboard, cover it, keep it moist, and check under it in a few days. I promise you'll be amazed at what shows up. Then expand the technique to other areas, building your soil's earthworm population systematically across your entire growing space. The earthworms are already out there, waiting for the right conditions. All you're doing is creating those conditions in exactly the spots where you want them working hardest. It's simple, it's cheap, and it works better than anything else I've tried in 20 years of gardening. Ready to build your earthworm empire? Subscribe to Grow with Soil for more practical science-based techniques that actually work in real gardens. Share this article with fellow gardeners who are ready to work smarter, not harder. Let's transform our soils together, one wet piece of cardboard at a time. Credits, script and narration by Grow with Soil.